The Otstal Alps hold secrets that maps refuse to acknowledge. A lone hiker crested the final ridge, expecting the usual jagged peaks, but found a valley that should not exist. Below him sat Oberfahl. He descended the slope, boots crunching on loose shale, until he reached the perimeter. No dogs barked. No smoke drifted from the stone chimneys. The silence was not natural. It was absolute. He stepped onto the main path, his breath hitching in the thin, stagnant air. He pushed open the heavy door of a house near the edge. A table stood in the center, set for 4 people. Bowls of grain and thick crusts of bread sat untouched. The food hardened by time but never consumed. He moved to the next house. The door stood ajar, swaying slightly in a wind he could not feel. Inside, a chair lay overturned. A wooden spoon rested on the floorboards as if dropped mid-motion. Every home held the same tableau of sudden, frozen interruption. He walked through the village square, his own footsteps sounding like thunder against the deadened earth. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. The village had not been abandoned through flight. It had simply stopped. The town hall sat at the center of the square, its roof sagging under the weight of decades. Hinges shrieked, dust motes danced, cracked windows. He walked toward the front, his boots echoing against the floorboards. On the long oak table, a single leather-bound ledger lay open. He leaned in, his fingers hovering over the parchment. The ink was dark, preserved by the dry, stagnant air. Every entry for the final week of October 1689 contained only one word, written in a cramped, frantic hand. Still. He flipped back a page. Still. He flipped back another. Still. The word repeated down every column, across every line, filling the entire page. It was not a record of events, but a descent into singular, suffocating repetition. He traced the letters. The ink seemed to pulse under his touch, the repetition pressing against his own senses. He looked up from the table, scanning the empty hall, but the silence had grown heavier. It felt physical now, a pressure against his eardrums. He dropped the ledger, the sound of it hitting the wood sharp and jarring, and retreated toward the door. The memory of the valley shifted. It was October 1689. The first snow fell on the harvest, trapping the people of Oberfahl within their own walls. For 12 weeks, the sun vanished behind the peaks. The cold was a physical weight, turning the valley into a pit of frozen shadow. Every morning, the villagers emerged to clear the drifts from their doors, only to find the snow level rising higher by the hour. They hauled timber from the surrounding woods, but the wood stores dwindled as the fires burned around the clock. The mountain pass became impassable. Ice walls sealed them. Damp wool, dying embers. People stopped speaking to save their breath, moving through the dim light with deliberate, careful steps. They boarded the windows with thick planks to block out the biting wind. The livestock huddled in the stalls, their breathing heavy and rhythmic in the dark. A primitive tension settled over the hamlet. Every creak of the floorboards drew eyes to the door. They were not just isolated by the frost. They were being watched by the encroaching dark. The winter was not just a season of ice. It was a catalyst for the sound that emerged from the bedrock. Every night, after the lamps were extinguished, a rhythmic scraping vibrated through the floorboards of every house. It sounded like iron talons dragging across solid stone. The villagers pressed their ears to the floor, listening to the cadence. It was methodical. It was hungry. The elders gathered in the town square, their faces gaunt, illuminated by the guttering torches. They spoke of the Jager des Stillen Tals, a forgotten entity buried deep beneath the valley floor. God ate breath, not flesh. Scraping neared. Children whimpered in their beds, but the elders silenced them with sharp gestures. They knew the ritual of the hunter. It was a bargain of survival. Stillness below, or the hunter claims all. The rhythm of the clawing accelerated, echoing from beneath the frost-hardened soil, forcing the villagers to press their hands over their mouths to stifle their own ragged breathing. The elders stood at the center of the town hall and signaled the final decree. Strict ritual, no whispers, no lullabies, no tears. Ghosts prepare. Doors locked, candles out, silent dread. Every motion became a calculated effort to avoid the smallest friction. They tied strips of linen around their own jaws to hold their mouths shut. Shattered bowl, silent tears. but dropped to her knees and clamped her hands over her ears, trembling as she waited for the ground to react. The village became a tomb of the living. Outside, stone walls felt winds lash. Silence reigned within, holding their breath, waiting for the moon to complete its cycle. They watched each other's eyes, searching for the slightest betrayal of noise, knowing that one single sound would doom them all. First night, frozen stillness, no sound. By the second night, the silence became a physical weight, pressing down on the chest of every inhabitant. A man in the corner of the town hall felt a tickle rise in his throat. A sharp, coughing fit seized him, eyes wide, nails digging deep, channeling the urge into a different kind of pain. He did not make a sound. The third and fourth nights bled together. The villagers stopped looking at the windows, fearing the movement of shadows outside. Eyes locked, breaths synced. A silent vigil. The air in the houses grew stagnant. The smell of unwashed bodies and fear filled the rooms. Statues of stone, joints ached. By the sixth night, the silence had become a predator in its own right. It inhabited the space between heartbeats. Every person in Oberfahl sat rigid, waiting for the final sunrise, their faces pale masks of concentration, holding the silence as if it were a fragile glass vessel that might shatter at the slightest tremor. The seventh night arrived with a darkness that felt solid. Every villager in Oberfahl remained locked in their rigid, silent vigil. In a small house near the edge of the woods, the air was still. 3-year-old Elsbeth shifted on her sleeping mat. Her eyes snapped open as a nightmare took hold. Her breath held 200 souls. The pressure of the dream forced a reaction. She drew a jagged, sharp intake of air and opened her mouth. A high, piercing scream cut through the house. It was not a long sound. It lasted exactly 2 seconds. Blades sliced silence. Floorboards groaned, not from the wind, but from the sudden, violent stirring of something deep within the bedrock. The scream did not echo. It did not fade. It was violently stopped. Sound vanished. Village reeled from the blow. The ritual was broken. The bargain was void. In the sudden, unnatural quiet that followed, the scratching beneath the floorboards accelerated into a frantic, rhythmic thudding that shook the walls. The scream died. A void remained. The air in the room grew cold, thin, and impossible to breathe. The mother lunged toward the child, her chest heaving as she prepared to call out for help, to scream for the neighbors, to break the crushing weight of the night. She opened her mouth wide, throat strained, cords like iron, no sound escaped, but her voice was gone. She clutched at her neck, fingers digging into her own skin, trying to force a vibration, a click, anything. There was only the sound of her own frantic, pulse-like scratching against the wall. She looked at her child, whose mouth was also frozen open in a silent, jagged line. The mother stumbled back, hitting the wall, her eyes wide with a realization that transcended terror. She was not just silenced, she was hollowed out. The room felt immense, empty of everything that made a life. She reached out to touch the table, to feel the solidity of the world, but her hands trembled in the suffocating, absolute void of the room. The silence was no longer a ritual. It was a cage. The silence rippled outward from the house, moving through the streets like a freezing tide. Across Oberfahl, 237 souls felt the same impossible pressure. It began in the chest, a cold, choking dread tightened throats. Life clutched within, but the resistance was futile. It felt as if invisible hooks were embedded deep in their vocal cords, yanking their voices into the dark. A blacksmith in the town square dropped his hammer. He opened his mouth to curse, but only a dry, rattling hiss escaped. A baker leaned against the oven, his jaw slack, his throat locked in a permanent, hollow configuration. There was no struggle that could stop it. One by one, the connections to the world were severed. By the time the moon began to pale, the village was a graveyard of the living. Silent shadows, eyes scanning walls, their bodies functional but stripped of the essence of their humanity. By the first light of dawn, the streets were deserted. Doors stood wide, tables were set, and the fire pits were cold. The inhabitants had not fled. They had been erased, leaving behind only the cold stone and the memory of a life that no longer had a voice. Today, The coordinates lead to a field of wild flowers. Nothing remains of the stone chimneys or the town hall. Hikers who reach the spot report a sudden crushing weight on their chests, as if the air itself has grown heavy and thick. Their own voices vanish for hours, leaving them standing in the grass, unable to call out or whisper. At midnight, the silence takes on a new texture. If you press your ear to the soil, you do not hear the wind, nor the rustle of grass. You hear the scratching. It is rhythmic, deliberate, and relentless. It does not come from beneath the earth, but from inside your own skull. It is the sound of a blade against the bone of your consciousness. Hunter's Blight, Valley Vanished, a deadly trap. It remains there, beneath the wildflowers, waiting for the next lullaby and the next scream. The weight on your chest is not the atmosphere. It is the hunter, pulling at your voice, waiting for you to make a sound so it can claim you next.